And warm up for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by Rocco Miller. He does an absolutely tremendous job over at Bracketeer.org. We're going to be talking about what has all been going into the scheduling here in the offseason because he does such a tremendous job on that front. If you've ever visited his website, Bracketeer.org, if you're looking for who your favorite team is going to be playing in the non-conference portion, he does such an amazing job on that front. Coupled with that, we're going to be taking a look at a few teams that he's bullish/bearish on. He, much like myself, loves to be able to give some love to these smaller teams. We're going to be taking a look at some teams that he thinks might be able to take a little bit of a leap forward as well. So we're going to be diving in on a wide variety of different fronts with Rocco in segment number 2, and you're in segment number 1. This is typically where I recap all the news and notes we saw in college basketball, in this case over the last 48 hours, because guys got a conference preview yesterday in the SWAC, and do expect these conference previews to be coming out one every few days. I don't want to be doing one every single day because I've done most of the conferences already, and if I were to do that, we would have all these done in like mid-September, and then we'd be sort of sitting on our hands for the next month and a half. So we're going to be doing these once every few days to be able to give you guys all the news in the meantime and then do a few of these conference previews. But we do have a little bit of good news to share here in a minute or two. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, the letters ZM they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that's fine, an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And for many of you guys that follow me, and I feel like most of you that are fans of VSiN, for those of you that do tune into the gambling space, unfortunately my show on VSiN, The Greg Peterson Experience, it was not picked up in the fall, and I know that there were some of you that had a little bit of uncertainty what was going to be happening with my work and what have you, and for those that are fans on the baseball front, what was going to be happening with those daily picks prior to the start of the college basketball season. And I am proud to say that, well, there are a few things that are going to be coming on the next few days in terms of like platforms, networks, what have you. This podcast will not be going away. Do not worry. You're not going to be seeing one day, oh, the Coast to Coast Hoops podcast has just disappeared into thin air or anything like that. That will not be happening. We had a few chats on Tuesday and everything is going to be all on the up and up there. I'm not going to give like the absolute fullest of full in terms of like networks, in terms of everything like that, but this is a podcast that's not going to be going away for those of you that appreciate my college basketball work, and thank you for that. I would not be where I am right now without your support, without all of you guys placing your faith in me, and hopefully I rechannel that as well, because I know that there are many hard workers that listen to this podcast. There are some of you that you might be doctors. You might be able to put quite a bit of money on a game-to-game basis on the games that you truly want to be betting. There are others of you that might be like students in college looking to be able to get by. There are some of you that might be like single parents that are looking to be able to build a better life for your kids. And this is a podcast that hopefully channels your energy there, because you guys deserve, because you are all hard workers, someone that works hard for you. And I'm going to be able to maintain that every single day. I have the assurance now that this is not going to be a podcast that is going to be going away. This is going to be here to stay. Again, there is a little bit of question mark, and I'm looking for a home for a little bit more live shows as well. And there might be a few things that take pretty much over the void left with the Greg Peterson Experience not being in the fold, but you know what, this will not be going away, and I'm very proud to be able to say that. And I do just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everyone that has been downloading this podcast. This is a podcast that you may recall, it used to be called Hoopin' with Hoops a few years ago, and this podcast that has been done every single day. There has not been a day missed on this podcast since November of 2019. That unbroken line, well, it is going to be continuing. We're going to do a podcast every single day here in 2024. The plan is to do that in every single day in 2025, every single day in 2026. I am going to go until they literally rip this podcast away from me. I have no opportunity to be able to upload to a different feed or anything like that. I will do everything possible to be able to give you guys this podcast daily. And on Tuesday, I was able to get that reassurance. So feel good there, and I feel just so blessed that so many of you tune into this podcast. So really do, from the bottom of my heart, again, I know that I've already said it once before, but just want to give you another big thank you, and a big thank you to all the great guests that do join this podcast as well, because they do make this podcast sparkle and shine in ways that I alone wouldn't be able to make it do so. And a great guest is Rocco Miller. We're going to be diving in on so many different fronts with him. On the flip side, here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And it's always great to be joined by this man, Rocco Miller. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org. Obviously, when it comes to the college basketball season, doing a great job with his bracketology. But this time of year, for those of you that are looking to get set for the upcoming college basketball season, getting up all these non-conference schedules for these teams, because how these teams schedule in the non-conference oftentimes determines whether or not they're going to be on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. And he does a great job keeping that straight for all of us college hoops fans. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, and the number 8 all together. And Rocco, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, I appreciate it. Good to be back on with you. I hope you had a good Labor Day. Can you believe it's already September?
It is absolutely unbelievable. We are getting closer and closer to the upcoming college basketball season, which I feel like is starting a few days earlier than normal as well. But how have you been able to gauge things from a scheduling front? Because it does feel like some of these teams have been taking their, shall we say, sweet time a little bit more this offseason than we've seen in past off seasons.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think every year it goes longer and longer into the fall. I mean, it approaches the fall. I guess we're not technically in the fall yet. We're probably going to make it to the first day of fall and not have all the schedules done, which is kind of remarkable. However, I did notice the last couple of weeks, some final decisions at a lot of places were getting made and confirmed. And that's why you're starting to see about 6 to 10 schedules drop every weekday. Typically, there's not much happening on the weekends with that. But at this point, we're finally at a place where T's are being crossed, I's are being dotted on some of these final contracts and amendments to get game dates in place and fill the schedules. The overall answer to your question is, with the amount of coaching turnover, 67 new Division I coaches is a record going into this year. That number just continues to, snowball year after year. Nobody's job is guaranteed at the end of the season. Things start going sideways. The only things the coaches can do between seasons that they have real control over are those, 13 to 15 scholarships that will eventually increase and who they play. Teams are very, very patient now with filling those scheduling slots. Even if they think they know what their schedule is going to be, this goes back to like June, July, they won't sign off on a game until around now because maybe something else better will come along, maybe a more winnable game or a more strategic game, depending on your point of view and the program you're at. They're very, very careful due to the fact, in most cases, that their job could be gone in about 5 months. And that's just the reality of it.
Absolutely. And I think that this brings up an interesting question for myself, because I know that this is something that we've talked about a lot on the podcast, especially this offseason. Some of these coaches that might be in a little bit of a pressure-packed year, trying to fluff it up a little bit more, trying to be able to get some of those wins so that way they're able to present like a 20-win season, even though they might have a losing record in conference, to be able to keep their job security. But how much do you think that margin of win sometimes goes into effect with some of these teams as well? Because those of us in the betting circle, we're always taking a look at some of these numbers and we're like, all right, let's see if this team is going to be able to cover like 20 points or something like that. Is that something that goes into consideration as well? Not just the wins themselves, but being able to completely blow teams out.
Well, blowing teams out, depending on where you're at. Of course, I'm primarily focused on NCAA tournament contenders, but I do follow all the leagues, throughout the year. I really follow them closely in the first couple months of the year while the spotlight can be focused on them. But I don't know that blowing teams out by a certain amount can get you into the tournament. It certainly can help your seed. And there's a big difference between those two things. When your metrics, whether it's KenPom or the net itself, next year's selection committee will have access to Bart Torvik's rankings. So Torvik and KenPom very similar. And so you got that. Torvik will replace the Sagarin. So those types of things will certainly help a team seed if you have a team like from the Big 12 last year. I think, Texas Tech is a good example. They pretty much played a softer non-conference schedule, blew a ton of teams out, then struggled, but got enough wins to be a tournament level team. And then their seed got better from there, just based on some of that stuff, like their net and average margin of victory and all that. But otherwise, to get into the tournament, it's all about who you play, where you play them. How you do away from home is critical. If you're a team that is scheduling softer, like you're alluding to, your window of opportunity is only shrinking, because you might be like a Missouri, for example. Missouri's schedule's out. I was just on a show over there. There's a lot of disappointment about their schedule. They play 8 or 9 home games that they're supposed to just absolutely destroy teams. But at the same time, that's not going to get them in the tournament, no matter how much they win by. They actually shrunk their window of opportunity to just a couple of really good games. I know they opened the season at Memphis, and then they're going to have a gauntlet of a SEC slate. Of course, if they can go 9-9 in those games, they probably have a good chance to get in, because you assume they'll get a couple big road wins within that 9-9. But in my opinion, why would you put yourself in that situation, that tight of a squeeze, when you can just go out, throw maybe 2 to 4, maybe even 6 strategic games, even if it's just like a neutral court game against an Atlantic 10, somebody that's respectable that lands in quad 2 or 3, give the committee a little bit more data to go off of. But, in these cases, the coaches just want to get to 20 wins. And sometimes that's enough to impress their athletic directors and other people that are of bigger decisions than us, Greg. That's what's the fascinating part about scheduling, because programs can be motivated in different ways than just making the tournament.
Yep, and that's so big that you talk about as well, because some of these guys, they're coaching for their job. And when you're at a level that isn't necessarily one of those big 4/5 conferences, just being able to say, you know what, we won 20 plus games is typically enough for them to be able to skate by and then some, as Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how do you take a look at a team like this? Because since you last joined me, my home state of Wisconsin, the Badgers, they dropped their schedule, and I was underwhelmed, to say the least. They're playing against the likes of Montana State, Holy Cross. And I will say that Appalachian State game on November 10th is a little bit under the radar, but really sans the game against Arizona. And then they're going to be a part of the Greenbrier tip-off, where they're guaranteed to go against Central Florida, and then the winner of a game against LSU and Pittsburgh. I was just very underwhelmed by the schedule in general. And I feel like there have been quite a few teams in the Big Ten that have been sort of taking on that Big 12 model of not necessarily scheduling tough, sans our obvious case of Michigan State, who will play anyone at any time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. Wisconsin was one where they were supposed to return a game out here to play in San Jose against Stanford. They played at the baseball field last year in Milwaukee, your beloved Brewers. Greg.
Yes.
That was supposed to be a return game, but with Kyle Smith coming here to Stanford, out here in the Bay Area where I'm from, they basically mutually agreed that, hey, don't worry about it. You don't need to come. We'll go get a different game. So now Stanford's going to play Oregon that day in San Jose instead of Wisconsin. Of course, joining the Big Ten, they'll have to make a Los Angeles trip for 2 games during league play. So their stance was, we're already coming to California. We don't need to take on a game against Power 5. So that knocks Wisconsin down from 5 games away from home to 4 against Power 5 level. Of course, they'll get 2 in West Virginia as part of the Greenbrier tip-off, opening against UCF, then going to play either Pittsburgh or LSU in the next game after. They play Butler in Indianapolis. That's a favorable matchup, as Butler projects to be a non-tournament team. And then, of course, Road Marquette and home Arizona are going to be the 2 big ones. And like you said, App State, Montana State are decent challenges at home, but very favorable because they are at home. And then between Detroit Mercy, Chicago State, UTRGV, and Holy Cross, those are very bottom of D1 types of scheduling moves. They're not alone. Like, you see the 4 schools that are entering the Big Ten, the vast majority are doing the same. And some of that can be excused a little bit for not wanting to leave the West Coast, because they're already going to have to do that a bunch during January and February. But like Washington, where I'm from originally, got out of the Gonzaga game. That definitely makes their schedule a little bit lighter. They will go to Nevada early, but besides that, that's the only road game. They play 2 games in Southern California with Colorado State, TCU, and Santa Clara in their event. A lot of very winnable home games, with the only real 2 marquee ones against, local Washington State and Seattle University. But Washington is 15-0 all time against Seattle U, despite last year's game going to 2 overtimes. And then the Washington State game, there'll be a favorable home matchup for the Huskies. So I would say that's even weaker than what Wisconsin did. USC, very similar. They're going to play 7 or 8 home games. And then Oregon themselves, despite taking on that Stanford game and playing in the NIL Festival, which will produce big matchups. They're doing everything inside the state of Oregon besides those four. So, yeah, I think everybody's gone a little bit watered down, knowing that the Big Ten is going to be a 20-game behemoth. But again, kind of like what I said about Missouri, it's not that much stronger, I guess, because, they do have a couple other extra opportunities compared to Missouri, and these other Big 12 schedules like Iowa State. But at the end of the day, if you don't go 10-10 in this league, or 9-11 maybe, and have some road wins to back that up, they could end up in the NIT.
Yep, and with the Big Ten, it feels like there's going to be a lot of middle-of-the-road teams in this conference as well, and I do want to get your thoughts a little bit on it as well, because Purdue, despite the fact that they lose Zach Edey, I am feeling very confident that they're going to be rock solid. Michigan State recognized that last year was not the year that they were hoping for, but I have faith that Tom Izzo going to be able to get things back online with them. And Illinois, one of the teams that has really utilized the transfer portal so well in this conference, have a lot of expectations for they in Indiana. But I do take a look up and down at this conference, and I see a lot of teams that it feels like they're probably going to be like contending for 8 seeds, 9 seeds, 10 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And it just feels like there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, meh in the conference.
It's fascinating. I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the things in Bart Torvik's preseason projections are what they are. There's a lot of teams that, throughout mid-major and low-major basketball where the data is a little bit off, or maybe a player or two are missing. So you got to take it all with a grain of salt. But I think one of the fascinating things is right now he has no Big Ten teams in the top 15. Purdue's right now the top team at number 16. And then there's no teams higher than 75, with Penn State being 18th place at 74. So you got every single team in an 18-team league between 16 and 74, which basically sets kind of a perfect picture. Whether his picture is perfect or not, that's not my point. My point is there's so much parity between the 18 teams. And this is where the things that I really care about and value as a basketball analyst are really going to decide who not only wins the league, but also like the batch of teams, because we know we're going to get a batch of teams that will all get in, somewhere between 7 as high as maybe 10 will get into the field. And that's all going to be decided on the margins. And the margins, Greg, in any league are going to be coaching, players that are clutch, that can close out games, having a go-to guy that you can count on when the game's tight with 5 minutes to go. I can't even imagine how many games in this league are going to come down to the last 5 minutes of the game, or managing foul trouble, or having an end-of-game strategy. That's where guys like Dusty May at Michigan are just absolute top of the class across the country. If Michigan is good enough talent-wise to be at the top, a guy like Dusty May can get them to a championship in year one. Not to knock Mike Woodson at Indiana. He's got unbelievable talent this year, but this is where he's got to start to prove himself as a strategic head coach and winning out those close games. It's a UCLA team with Mick Cronin trying to get competitive again. Looks like they've reloaded that roster, got away from the international model. That's where Mick Cronin can come in and just be a defensive menace and take teams out of games. Those are just 3 quick examples, but that's where this league is going to be won and lost, and there's going to be so many games that come down to the wire. And then you know how it goes from there, Greg. Whoever wins those games between January 1st and January 31st, that's going to set the momentum up for what happens in February and March, and who has the confidence and which teams kind of fall apart at the seams.
Oh, and we both know in the Big Ten as well how big that home court advantage is as well. Who's ever able to pull out just those gritty road wins, they are going to be the teams that put themselves in great position. As Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, a big reason why I always love getting you on this podcast is you're so much like myself. You love taking a look at these low/mid-major teams. And when it comes to scheduling, because we were talking about it, some of these teams that are perceived cream puffs, other these teams that nobody wants to play. But is there a few teams that are popping up that are mid-majors that maybe in past years teams would have been very willing to schedule, that this offseason teams were saying, no thanks, we don't want any part of these guys, because that bye game might be the, as our good friend John Rothstein likes to say, the epitome of brutality?
Yeah, I think there's a couple examples in almost every league. One league that just stood out to me before the show, getting ready to join you, was the CAA. I think the CAA is pretty fascinating this year because in years past, we've seen a very clear divide between that top group of teams. Charleston, UNCW, Hofstra, Delaware was really good for a while last year. Drexel was tough. And, Stony Brook did make a run to the finals last year. But some of those schools are kind of traditionally at the top. Towson actually coming into this year as the favorite per Torvik. We're seeing a lot of some of those same teams at the top. But where I'm very fascinated is now at William and Mary, Brian Earl comes in and runs an unbelievable system from Cornell. And not only that, he brought in Keller Boothby, who he's a grad transfer, key player, but he's going to be kind of like a player coach for him. Might be your sixth man for the Tribe. But outside of that, there are 5 guys that he got all to stay there. Were part of the last regime. So I think William and Mary has been kind of scary for teams in scheduling, if you can believe that. I don't think I've seen that before. They're kind of my first example. And I think these are all great signs for the league, and I think the other one, there's actually a couple, Hampton, I thought also made a very good hire with Coach Thomas, and he brings in a whole new cast of characters. So Hampton's going to be completely revamped, but the majority of these guys are seniors or grad transfers. Noah Farrakhan, from West Virginia, Eastern Michigan, he's been all over, but he's a total microwave. And that's a little dangerous in a league like the CAA. He's obviously had his issues with taking care of the basketball. He's had some high turnover types of games, but if he can dial it in and use that experience and lead this Hampton team, you're looking at a Hampton team with Wayne Bristol Jr., who came in from a losing Georgetown program, looking for an opportunity here to win at a lower level. Xavier Long, coming off an injury, but played well in the past at Canisius. Tyler Rice comes in from ETSU. They got Kyrie Mullen to stay, who averaged almost 15 a game. He'll probably be the leading scorer again for this Pirate team. So again, just incremental gains. I don't think Hampton can win the league, but this team has certainly got a lot more upside than they did in the previous years, and it actually created some hesitation within scheduling. And then last but not least is North Carolina A&T, and I think a lot of people forget that A&T last year, before Landon Glasper got hurt, they were off to a 4-2 start and in the top 4 in the standings. Now that's only 6 games in, but guys like me were very excited about the Aggies. They had already pulled off a couple upsets in league, and nobody likes playing at North Carolina A&T. I've been in that gym. I visited there last year. It's a hot, sweaty gym, and the fans are right on you. And in league games, the band is just cranking the whole game. And with Landon Glasper back, a 21 points per game scorer, as well as Kami and Shell, a 13-point per game guy. It's their 2 best players. Now, they're both small. 6'2" is Glasper. Shell's only 5'10", but they got a lot of continuity back, and they bring in Jonathan Lamoth from Maryland. Didn't play a lot at Maryland, but he came from a Big Ten school. It's a big deal for A&T. And a real big contributor from Northwestern State transferred in Ryan Forrest. He averaged 12 a game there. So, again, not to go through all the roster, but I think A&T is getting slept on a lot. And there were actually a couple teams that avoided them in scheduling as well. So my larger point about the CAA is I think the top got a little bit watered down with Charleston having a change. Wilmington had a lot of guys graduate. Towson's got the most returnees, but they got to prove themselves. So I think the top comes down a little bit, and I think the bottom's rising up a little bit. That could lead to some very big surprises in this league.
Yep, and as we know, Drexel, always a team as tough as nails on defense. They lose quite a bit from a season ago. Hofstra, that guard play is going to be good as well, and I'm so glad that you bring that up, because when I've been doing my conference previews here in the offseason, the CAA was one of the toughest conferences to be able to pick a projector or finish for, and I think that there's going to be a lot of fun on that conference, and there's going to be a lot of fun all throughout this college basketball season. Rocco, you're here for it all. I know that you're doing a tremendous job helping these teams out with scheduling, with a little bit more work with scheduling this time of year than you've had in past years because of all the changes that we've had with coaches, but you're doing a great job on that front and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Rocco Miller 8 on Twitter/X. That's the @. Follow me there. Updates pretty much daily on all types of leftover scheduling that's still to come. And then we are starting to enter into preview season as well. My website, bracketeer.org, will do a big rollout in terms of projecting the 68 teams. Again, this will be the one chance I get to put my opinion into that. Always take a lot of pride in that, basically taking all the information I've learned throughout the offseason for both one-bid leagues and multi-bid leagues to put that projection together. But it also serves as a season preview with dark horse picks in every league, so that can help all types of audiences, have some sleeper teams. I know everybody likes those, as well as, player of the year and newcomer of the year in each league, and in-depth preview across all. We're down to 31 leagues now. We're losing the Pac-12, RIP, but yeah, previewing all 31 leagues. So that should be rolling out by mid-October. Might start putting some stuff out a little earlier if there's time for it. But yeah, it's certainly going to fly by. That's all I know, because ever since we left the Final Four in early April, these last 5 months have flown by.
Yep, they certainly have. And I know that you, Rocco, ever since the nets were cut down, you immediately turned your attention to the 2024-25 season, and you're about as prepared as anyone for this season as can be, because when you've got 364 teams, there's a lot of work to be done, and Rocco, he's been putting in that work, and it is very much appreciated on this show. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, now part of the VC Family Podcast, and if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Appreciate you guys tuning in every single day, and I will be with you guys moving forward, so have no fear there. The conference previews will continue as we've got 9 remaining in total, so we're touching them all with regards to conference previews, and we're touching the podcast every single day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.